All right, and Ted, you're muted.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. All right, hello everybody and welcome to the August 18th meeting of the Design Review and Tree Board. This meeting is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with the state of California executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Live stream and Zoom is being utilized for this meeting. In case of technical issues, meetings will be uploaded to the city website as soon as possible after this meeting. We'll be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom. DRB board members and staff are participating from remote locations, practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting by use of Zoom as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak may do so during public comment or may comment on agenda items during discussion of each item and must be logged into Zoom. Live stream is for viewing only. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way to provide public comment. So there we have that. So can we have a roll call, please?
Thank you. I will start off with Chair Luthen.
Here.
Vice Chair Langberg.
Sorry.
Lars, I know you're there. I just see
I'm
there
here.
you go. Carrie Bush.
I'm here.
Christine Level.
Here.
And Marshall, Belf, are you there? I saw him in the waiting room, so I know he's here somewhere.
I see him, he's muted.
All right, let me just ask him to unmute himself. Okay, I do see Marshall's here. So we do have 5 members and a quorum today.
Great. First item on our agenda is our approval of minutes from June 16th. And you have to, I did not happen to get those minutes. So I am guilty of not having minutes. Did everybody else have a chance to review minutes?
Yeah, I have.
All right, were there any comments on minutes?
Okay. No comments.
No comments.
No comments? Okay. Can we have a motion to approve minutes, please?
Sure, I'll move to approve the minutes as issued.
All right. Can I have a second, please?
I'll be glad to second those.
All right. I have a motion and a second. I will be abstaining because I have not had a chance to review. So all in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye.
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 Thank
All
you.
right.
Minutes are approved.
Yes, the minutes are approved. Thank you, Chair Luthen. And just one note, because we do have quite a few members, if you could mute yourself if you're a member of the public until we get to public comment, that would be helpful just in keeping down the background noise.
Sounds good. Thank you for that. Next item on our agenda is Planning Department update on matters of general interest.
Thank you. And actually, Chair Luthen, I might suggest we move this to the end of the meeting, given the number of folks from the public that we have. Although I like to talk about water conservation to anyone who will hear it, I think that might be more timely.
That sounds great. Let's do that. And then let's move to comments from the public regarding items not on our agenda. Anybody have anything to say on items we will not be discussing today? And have we received any electronic communications on any items?
Not for items that are not on the agenda.
Seeing no one interested in that, let's move on. Statements of conflict of interest. Any members have any conflicts? I assume that since we only have one item on our agenda, if you had a conflict, you would not be here. All right, hearing none, let's move to our regular agenda item. Item A, design review, tree removal and tree protection plan for 771 and 773 First Street. Can we have the staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair Luthen. And I will ask Jeff, the planner for the project, to outline the vast majority of this, but I'll just kind of do a little bit of setup. This is a single-family house and accessory dwelling unit, as well as tree removal for one tree. Or actually, Jeff will talk about the trees later, as well as tree protection plan. The tree protection plan does not need to be approved and reviewed until a later date prior to construction, but we do have our city arborist, Becky Duckles, here, fresh off of actually reviewing a hazard tree. And she will be giving an oral report as comments as well. Her comments were included in the staff report that was issued last week. But just so those of you know, she is here, and we'll be discussing the project. And so Jeff, will start with you and then move on to Becky.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Design Review Board. For those who don't know me, my name is Jeffrey Sutherland. I'm the contract planner working on behalf of the city of Sebastopol. Here for your consideration is a design review, tree removal, and tree protection plan to construct a new single-family residence and accessory dwelling unit at 771 and 773 First Street. As noted in the staff report, a design review board approval is required because the application involves the development of a new single-family dwelling unit in a residential subdivision of 3 units as part of the Scotia subdivision approved by the City Council in 2001. Specifically, the project proposes to construct a new 5,321 square foot single-family residence with a 1,481 square foot attached garage and workshop. This also includes a new 801 square foot detached accessory dwelling unit with a 306 square foot attached garage, and the removal of one existing heritage oak. The project proposes 3 covered parking spaces for the primary residence and 1 covered parking space for the accessory dwelling unit. The project also proposes a hot tub spa area between the primary and accessory dwelling units. Landscaping will consist of trees, shrubs, and grasses that are native to the West Sonoma County and Greater California area. The general plan land use designation for the site is medium density residential. The project is zoned R3 single family residential. As stated in the staff report, the project is consistent with general plan land use designations and zoning designations for the project site, as it involves the use of a residential and accessory dwelling unit in an area that contains an array of residential uses. Additionally, the three parcels in the subdivision are subject to the conditions of approval and secret mitigations adopted by the City Council via resolution number 5220. Of note, this resolution requires design review and also sets more stringent tree protection and tree removal requirements than the standard tree ordinance, in addition to setting specific building envelope limits that vary from the city's normal setbacks for the zoning district. Overall, the project is consistent with the design guidelines in that it avoids box-like forms and has extensive articulated facades and varied roofs. However, staff is concerned that the overall mass of the primary dwelling is considerably larger than the existing surrounding residences within the vicinity. While the city does not have a maximum home size or floor area ratio limit for residential parcels in the city, mitigation 8 of the resolution 5220 states that the size and height of the homes to be constructed within this subdivision shall not exceed those of similar homes of a more recent construction in the general area. Furthermore, staff was initially concerned with the project's suitability for the site. Okay, sorry, I thought somebody had a comment. And that the site did not adequately accommodate the existing slope and proposed significant cut and fill operations in order to place the proposed structures. Based on the concerns of staff, the project civil engineer performed a more detailed estimate and provided a revised exhibit at 550 cubic yards of cut and 380 cubic yards of off-haul. While the amount of cut has been reduced relative to staff concerns, staff finds that the extensive grading in order to accommodate the proposed structures may not reflect the existing topography and protect significant site features. In addition, staff finds that the exterior color scheme, which is limited to a range of beige and yellows, does not provide the same level of individuality to the units across a full set of structures. Staff recommends the board review and discuss the potential for a modified color scheme, which represents the applicant's best wishes, but still provides greater variety to the development. Furthermore, staff finds that the design provides appropriate transitions and relationships to adjacent properties, and that the public right-of-way, in that it contains sizable setbacks and sets the structures low to the ground from the uphill properties to reduce the massing from adjacent parcels. Staff finds that the dwellings also appear to be compatible with the neighborhood in that its design is consistent with several existing dwellings in the area and contributes to the architectural diversity of the community. Staff also finds that the design does not impair the desirability of investment or occupation in the neighborhood, in that it revitalizes a vacant lot and creates a single family and accessory residence while leaving ample space to create an outdoor area with permeable surfaces, vegetation, trees, and open space. Finally, the project proposes the removal of one heritage oak located at the eastern project boundary of the site, with another three heritage oaks varying diameter breast height recommended for removal by the project arborist. The city arborist is concerned about several impacts to these trees, as the roots pruning is in excess of Sebastopol standards are proposed. While the trees recommended for removal are due to construction impacts, staff believes, in conjunction with other recommended modifications, there may be opportunities to reduce impacts to healthy trees to allow for their retention. The city arborist will review the detailed tree protection plan prior to the issuance of a building permit to ensure that impacts to the remaining trees are minimal. Finally, the staff recommends that the board discuss and determine what constitutes an appropriate infill development for the size and height of the home, given the subdivision condition number 8. Staff recommends that the board set a maximum size of not more than 4,500 square feet of conditioned space for the primary residence. Staff further recommends that the board discuss other potential modifications, which in coordination with the reduction of size of the structure could provide for more modified massing, reduction in grading, and potential reduction in impact to trees. If it is the consensus of the board that the proposed single family and accessory dwellings are compatible with the site, staff recommends that the application be reviewed and provide feedback to the applicant. Alternatively, the board may find that revisions are necessary and a continuance is appropriate. Staff recommends that the board provide direction for redesign to the applicant in the event of a continuance or rationale in the event of a denial. At this time, are there any questions for staff?
And Jeff, if you don't mind, I think we'll ask the board to hold comments until we've heard from Becky, and then I have a couple comments myself.
That's fine.
Thank you, Jeff. And so Becky, if you are able to provide some additional comments, I know that you've been to the site a couple of times now and have been talking with Chip Sanborn, who did the arborist report. If you have anything you'd like to add at this time, that would be helpful.
Okay.
It was ironic that this morning the emergency tree removal had Chip Sanborn up in the tree. So I asked him a couple of questions that I had about this project, and specifically why he hadn't included some other large trees on the site, a group of redwoods and some others. And he reminded me that there's three separate lots. And so there's, in his opinion, there wasn't very much going on in the other two lots at this time, but I would imagine that there's going to be some improvements in grading, and when the new driveway is installed, there may possibly be some impact beyond the edges of the driveway, certainly for surface drainage and the grading that may impact other trees on the other lots, but that yet to be determined. It was just a conversation, and he answered my questions about that. I think my more immediate concerns relate to the property line trees, the black oaks on the east property line, and those trees are what we call boundary trees or property line trees because they have some parts that are shared with other properties. In this case, the roots, and in some cases, overhanging branches. And so Busca versus Patel, the law that went to the District Supreme Court in California and established precedent about property line tree management, pretty much determined that boundary trees or property line trees are the responsibility of all the owners, and anything that would be detrimental to those trees, such as root loss or excessive pruning or fill with, or other excavation, other trenching or whatever within their root zones would definitely affect them, and so should be discussed among the property owners. There's an interesting situation in Sebastopol last year where a property line tree that was actually shared by 4 different property owners had to be mediated by an attorney and an arborist who happens to specialize in mediation and mitigation, and he assigned different percentages of responsibility to 4 different property owners, and they were all happy in the end. But in this case, I think that there's going to be excessive impact on the trees, which is not necessary. If the building could be reduced in size or in distance from those trees that are the property line trees, there's going to be far less impact on them. So my concern is the amount of pruning, the root loss from excavation, for any grading that looks like there actually even have to be pruning for building clearance. So in any case, I think that progress could be made in terms of protecting those trees for the benefit of everyone.
Thanks, Becky. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Becky. And we do have the tree exhibit up here, which has a little bit more clearer numbering than the original plan. I'm happy to bring that up again as needed with the board's discussions.
Great, thank you for that. Any questions of staff or of Becky Duckles from board members?
Are these general questions for staff, not related to the tree?
Yep. Yeah, general questions for staff.
Okay. I'm that sent Jacob, who lives adjacent to this property, and he makes a comment in his letter, concern number 1, where he talks about correct documents being placed into the design review packet regarding the resolution for the subdivision. Is this indeed true?
So I think I understood the question, and Christine, you're a little garbled, but I believe I understand the question to be, do we have the final resolution for the subdivision in the meeting packet, in the staff report? Is that correct?
Yes, because he's saying in his letter, item number 1, that it's not the final resolution.
Okay, thank you. I can address that. We did produce a revised report. We did have a prior version, but the signed final resolution is in the meeting packet for this week, for this meeting. So yes, we do have that resolved.
Okay, so it says he's making a comment regarding the final resolution, the approved resolution. And he's stating that the conditions of approval, and he bolds, in general, the size and height of the homes to be constructed with this subdivision shall not exceed those of similar homes of more recent construction in the general area. So he's
Yes.
quoting, I believe, from the final resolution.
That's correct. And
yet
Christine, would you
in
like me to
your
comment
staff
on that?
report- Well, in your staff report, you're proposing increases in the not shall exceed. You're proposing exceeding. So can you comment on that?
Sure. Thank you, Christine. And so I did actually speak with our city attorney regarding this. So this is quoted in the staff report, but it's also available on page 111 of the packet. It's condition M8, and the wording of it is, in general, the size and height of the homes to be constructed within this subdivision shall not exceed those of similar homes or more recent construction in the general area. And so that actually includes two different ways of looking at it. One is a shall not exceed, but the other is the in general. And so I did speak with our city attorney about what does that mean. And we determined that there is some level of similarity to existing homes, but it does not need to be exact match because of the wording in general. Not the cleanest language, but that's what we have from 2001. So what we did as staff was we did a couple of things. One is since 2001, the approval of that subdivision, accessory dwelling units are now regulated ministerially based on state law, and the size of an ADU is specified both in state law and in our own city ordinances. And so we're ignoring the ADU at this point because that is not, it's actually ministerial, it's subject to state law. We also did not include the garages. I know of a lot of larger barns and garages in that area that people have that are not included in the analysis that we did of and I believe that individual had submitted a diagram of the area with some average or with some square footages. They ranged generally from 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. There were certainly a couple of outliers at 1,200 square feet or 800. I think there were a couple above the 3,000. But what we're providing to the board is some guidance that in general, the homes in that area, according to the assessor parcel data, are somewhere in the range of 2,000 to 3,000 square feet of habitable space for the primary residence. It is up to the board to determine what in general and it shall not exceed the size of similar homes. That does not necessarily need to be an exact size. You could use, and we used, obviously, if you use the smack dab in the middle, 2,500 square feet at 100%, that's 2,500 square feet. But we did include on page 6 of the report a couple of different options in addition. Because obviously all of the existing homes in the neighborhood could do additions and increase their size over time, as many of the homes in Sebastopol do. So is there some wiggle room for a brand new home? And so either based on an average of 2,500 or 3,000 square feet, we did provide some ranges. In speaking with the city attorney, though, he does feel that going beyond 150% of the upper range of that, so going beyond 150% of 3,000 square feet, which would be the 4,500 square feet maximum that staff recommends, would not comply with the resolution that council adopted. That said, staff isn't necessarily recommending that top range 4,500 square feet. We're recommending the DRB discuss the issue and determine what is reasonable, similar, and in general, but with that being an upper limit.
So now
Thank you.
we find ourselves in the situation of attorney versus attorney, ironically. So I have.
Well, and in fact,
Carrie,
yeah, and in fact, your
Yeah.
deliberations could say it needs to be the exact average to meet that. It is a discretionary interpretation for the DRB to do.
Correct, and I appreciate your comment. So I have one more question from this Ken Jacobs letter. In the letter, he also claims that the neighborhood within 300 feet, he doesn't use that, but I think that's the number. But anyway, he claims that they were not notified. Can you comment on that?
Sure. So our zoning ordinance does not require notification for design review hearings unless it's 10 units or more or 10,000 square feet of commercial space or more. And so we did not notice per that standard. We had heard from the applicant that they had coordinated with neighbors, but obviously the word got out and I'm happy for that. So everyone who's joining us today did hear about that. And I did actually talk with at least one council member regarding potentially changing that rule in the future. It's a little difficult when some new single family homes on vacant lots require design review and others don't. Would we then have to, it's a more complex issue than just deciding, well, if it's a new single family home, let's notice people, because we do have several lots in town that would not require design review.
Okay, thanks, Carrie.
You're welcome. Thanks, Christine.
Christine, any other questions while you're on a roll?
No, just those. Thanks.
All right. Laura's, any questions, staff?
No.
Gary, any questions, staff?
No, nothing.
Marshall, any questions?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. Earlier you couldn't, and I've been pushing buttons.
Looks like you pushed the right one.
Great. Well, I may have come in a little late because I was having trouble with getting on the call in the first place. So I just have a question regarding one of the neighbors in the letter he sent about this large tree with the 7 trunks. Have you discussed that, or when would the appropriate time to be in this meeting? When would be appropriate to talk about that?
That would probably be if you have questions about it for Becky Duckles, the city's arborist. She's here and now would be a good time. If you have questions for the applicant, that can come up when the applicant makes their presentation, which will be next.
Oh, I see. Well, my comment was only that, I felt strongly about saving the tree, and I see a lot of different ways to tweak things to get the foundations away from the tree as far as possible, and so I don't want to be arbitrary in what I say or anything, but there are options without redesigning anything to bridge those roots,
Okay.
so that everybody's happy. Win-win,
Okay. Why don't we either bring that up during the applicant's presentation, or we can talk about it during our discussion when we're deliberating.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
Sounds
Marshall.
good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions for staff or for Becky. So why don't we have our applicant make a presentation? And I do, Rick Murphy, I do see you waving your hand. I think we're going to have the next piece of the meeting is going to be the applicant making a presentation, kind of laying the whole thing out for us, and then there will be an opportunity for public comment right after that. All right, so I think our applicant is in attendance here. If someone would like to make a presentation, now would be a great time. Gregory, great. How are you?
Good. How you doing, Ted? Good to see you.
Doing just fine. Good to see you.
There was a question asked prior to the meeting about amount of time that we have for presentation. Is there as far as this is, there's a lot of moving parts here, and I just want to make sure that I'm using the appropriate amount of time to do this presentation, as well as leaving an opening for Chad Mosier of LACO, civil engineer, to be able to say some things, as well as maybe even respond to some questions as well.
Yeah, I don't know that, Carrie, do we have a time limit of any kind?
So thank you, Ted. Normally we try to stay around 10 minutes. I think given the complexity of this design, though, I think some additional time may be appropriate, perhaps 15 minutes, and for both of the full presentation, all parties.
That would be great.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. My name's Greg Beal. I live here in Sebastopol. I actually live on Swain Avenue. My office here on South Main Street. My wife grew up here, and so I'm in the neighborhood of this project as well. I have been fortunate enough to work with Steve and Rose, our design firm, Builder Studio of Sebastopol, has been doing the architecture, landscape architecture, and everything for this project. And our sister company, Thrive, is intended to do the construction. I want to thank everybody for being here, including the public. I look forward to hearing more of their comments, and I want to thank the staff as well for the hard work that they've done to put this report together, which was very helpful for us. So what I wanted to start with is just say that leading up to the first design review board meeting that was scheduled, I think it was on the 4th. It was a bit of a scramble on everybody's part, including planning. The assistant planner, Alan, who had been talking with quite a bit over the past year, has since left. And I think there was some regrouping going on that took things kind of to the last minute, and our ability to get prepared and everybody else's. But and then it eventually had to get postponed to here because of for a conflict of interest of one of the board members. I would have liked to have done many things differently, especially in hindsight, as far as opportunities lost, as far as communication with neighbors of this meeting coming up. But like I said, it was a bit of a scramble, and we were trying to get it, and we barely even knew it was happening for a short period of time before as well. But the planning, the comments from the public were appreciated, even though they were hard to read, both for myself and our clients. And so I think if it's okay, Ted, our clients just wanted to say a couple words. Is it okay if they just jump in here for a second and say a couple things?
Yeah, that would be great.
Great, thank you.
There we go. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Steve, and this is my wife, Rose. I grew up in Sebastopol and been living down here in the Silicon Valley for a while. And when an opportunity came up where we could build what we want to be our retirement house on this lot that the family has owned. So it's nothing, we've never built a house before, so it's all quite new to me. And I was very happy to find Builder Studio, because they're local and they do everything, and they're very good at that. So that's why I'm going local there. We wanted to be really, of course, make good contact with all our neighbors at first. So we sent out letters and communications with all of them. We were a little surprised that a lot of them, or the ones that commented, there were some on First Street that did get in contact with us, which is really nice. There were some others that sent the letters to the public comments without contacting us first. So we were a little surprised about that, but I'm sure it'll all work out in the end. So that's pretty much it. It's kind of new to us, so we're just kind of going here and seeing what happens.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
So what I'd like to get into here, thank you, Steve and Rose, is talking a little bit about the process of this project and finding some discrepancies in a number of different things, and just trying to clarify, I think, the important facts of this project. The other two lots in this subdivision are not owned by our clients. So I think there was a statement in there to say that they own all of the lots. Rose and Steve do not own the other two lots. This is their one lot that's theirs. The square footages of what is the primary residence, what is storage, what is other components are incorrect in a lot of places as well. And I'm going to talk about those, including I found some inconsistencies on our submittal as well. So it's kind of confusing. Often with projects, we don't include storage and so much information about crawls or, under house square footage and storage and things like that. And then there was another, I think on page 4 of the report there, it says that the ADU is 2 stories on the graph there. And I think that was just probably left over from something else. It's a 1-level ADU. I just wanted to get something straight out of the way, is that the clients have no issue or concern of eliminating the hot tub due to the drought. I wanted to talk about how, and I think Carrie actually already mentioned this, the city does not have a max home size, floor area ratio of those different things. And the floor levels and ridge heights in comparison to the adjacent properties is something I just wanted to share my screen, if it's okay with everybody. Oh, am I able to share, Jeff?
We're fixing that right now.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you. And is there anyone else from your team who will need it? I can get that set up.
It's just myself for now, but Chad
Okay.
we'll probably have him talk in a little bit, if that's okay. There we go. Okay. Can everybody see? It's rough, but it is a grid drawing of 2 masses. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Let me move a couple things out of the way. I apologize. So what this is I used, and I'm gonna make a couple marks here, is I just wanted to start by showing some of the aspects of how this project sits on the land compared to the surrounding area. Let's see here. This elevation, and where I just did the little blue rectangle, is the sidewalk at Jewel. This area in the front here is a representation, I'd give it plus or minus 4 feet, of the Olsen's home directly above the property, their lower level, main level deck, and their, half a flight up to the upper deck behind it. And I just wanted to be able to show kind of where the elevations of this home, this proposed new residence, lie compared to that property. Something that we paid a lot of attention to and were concerned about. So the floor height of the upper level of this project is where I just put that blue line there. And the ridge of the home is at about the floor height of the upper level of their home there. So it's quite a bit down the hill from there. Does anybody on the board have any questions about what they're looking at? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I'm gonna exit out of there. Let's see here. So what I wanted to go over is square footages, I think is an important part of this. And I think that's something that's got kind of misconstrued. a bit on everybody's end, including ours. The main residence here, the conditioned square footage of the proposed design is 4,500 square feet, or just over 4,521 square feet. There is a unconditioned kind of multi-purpose room, and there's a garage and a shop and some storage that are accounted for the rest of the square footage. The main floor, the upper level of this project, which is where Rose and Steve will spend the majority of their time, that was all designed from the inside out. That layout is extremely specific from the very beginning. They wanted a master bedroom on the southeast corner, an office on the southwest corner, and a kitchen on the northwest corner, and a meditation room on the northeast corner. And we worked all of those things out. That square footage of the upper level is 2,990 square feet, and basically dictates the majority of the footprint of the home. That, no matter whether we reduce square footage or altered, that layout is very detailed and specific to what they want to do and the way they function in their home. A part I want to add to this is we've done some analysis of some homes in the general area as well, and the condition of approval that's part of the resolution of the subdivision in 2001 specifically identifies Swain Woods, and as Carrie and Christine have already mentioned, what general area actually means. There is an I looked at square footages all around within probably a quarter-mile radius, and I found that there are many homes. Let's see, I'll list a few to start with. Excuse me while I get the right sheet. Oh, here we go. On Swain Avenue, which is just down the street from my house, there is a home that is 4,994 square feet of conditioned space. On Palm Avenue, there is a house that is 3,750 square feet. On Mitchell Court, which is as the crow flies not far from here, 6,220 square feet. And also in addition to that, on Swain Woods Terrace, there's several that are 3,400 square feet. Dowd Drive, 3,300 square feet, and they all have 3-car garages in addition to that. There's another home on Swain Avenue, 560, that's 3,200 square feet. Western Avenue, 3,750. There's a lot of large homes in our area, and they are all on significantly smaller lots and on the main public streets as well. So our interpretation of not exceeding or fitting in within square footage of homes around, we found several homes that are as large or larger. And speaking of size of the lot compared to the square footage, I also did an analysis of just conditioned square footage, meaning the residence part of the square footage compared to the size of the lot. And our clients, the Shocks, their property is just a couple feet under 1 acre exactly. And so their conditioned square footage of their primary residence is about 4,500 square feet per acre. Most of the adjacent parcels, when you compare that way on Jewel, are between 6,600 and over 9,000 square feet per acre if you looked at ratios of land compared to square footage. But what I want to make clear is I'm bringing these up because we are referencing a very specific guideline in the resolution of the subdivision. The intention of our clients, it was not a design criteria to build a large house. It was to design the use of spaces on the inside and their relationship with one another. Believe it or not, Builder Studio in general, Marilyn Stanley, the architect that led this project, we specialize in building small, universal design, aging in place, those types of things. We get calls often for people that want to do additions, and we convince them to reimagine their existing spaces often. In this case, there are very, very specific, thought out reasons for how to use these spaces. In addition to that, the garage and shop area, the unconditioned areas, we explored many options where that was attached to the house at the same level, if it was a single level house, or if it was detached. And the massing and the lot coverage was significantly greater than this. The motivation behind this design was to realizing that the main level of the residence needed to be above grade without disturbing grading anywhere near the creek, that they needed to have indoor outdoor that was decks, and it had to be so far off the ground that they didn't have drainage issues into the uphill side. And so what we found is that if it was a single level house of 2,990 square feet, as it is designed on if it was 4 feet higher than if it was a single level home, we could fit the garages and the laundry room and the guest bedrooms and the sewing room underneath the house versus actually constructing more mass and more building up at the main level that would be more seen by the neighbors, especially on the east side of the home. I have several examples of design exploration that we did early on and through the middle of the project. If anybody wants to see those, I'm happy to take a tour. There's maybe a dozen to 20 different drawings of varying hand sketch and CAD, and they show us exploring the driveway on the uphill side, the garage is on the north side of the building, the ADU and the house being swapped. And every one of those scenarios, because of this established building envelope that is set by this subdivision resolution and the creek setbacks, we were basically realized very quickly that any part of the house moving closer to the creek would actually require more grading within the creek setback for driveways and accessibility. And we also realized in exploring some driveway solutions and other uses of the east side of the property above the house, that it would require just as much, if not more grading to get the driveway to actually pass over the top above the house. That would probably require retaining walls and fill in order to make that work. We quickly determined that would be a similar amount of impact on the trees as what the house was. As we took all those considerations, we realized that for the privacy of the neighbors and everybody else, and our clients for that matter, the public, day use parts of this design are facing to the west and to the south, and bedrooms and bathrooms, the quiet rooms, are the ones that are up against the east wall and where the closer property line is within the legal building envelope established in the subdivision. If we moved the house farther away and closer to the creek, which we can only go as far as the building envelope allows, which isn't much, the orientation of the home would probably have to require the bedrooms and living space, or excuse me, the living space primarily, and public usable space and driveway and cars to all be on the east side, more exposed and directly connected to the neighbors close by, closest to this where this building envelope is. And any questions? Just, I know I'm going through a lot of things. I don't know if Ted, if you want me just to go through presentation completely or take questions as I go.
No, let's continue on.
Okay, thank you. So let's see here. So what I kind of wanted to next go to is that in part of our design process, and as planning is stated, that other than the size that, we appear to be compatible. And the large structures should be designed to reduce their perceived height and bulk, which they've also commented that we've done a good job on. That the overall square footage or mass, I should say, of this structure would not reduce significantly with how it affects the eastern line of this property, even if we wiped out all of the usable space underneath the building. It would, if anything, it would just lower by about 4 feet. Which reminds me, so let's see here. I think if it's okay, I have a number of other points as far as clarifying square footage and things like that, but I kind of wonder if it makes more sense to go through the normal process, and if there's an opportunity that I can speak again later down the road when appropriate. Does that sound okay?
Sounds fine. Yeah.
Let's do that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any questions from DRB board members for Gregory, the applicant? Let's see. Let's go individual. Lars, any questions?
Gregory, can you explain your building approach in this building?
I couldn't hear you very well, Lars. What was that?
Sorry, your approach to green building in the.
I heard green building, and then I couldn't hear what you said after that.
There's somebody's got a serious background noise going.
Yeah.
Just if you could describe green, in green building terms, what your approach is for the project.
Sure. Well, so I'm not the lead. Unfortunately, Marilyn, who is this time didn't work for her. I can speak to is orientation and functionality relates to how people actually function in the space. This isn't just sourcing materials locally, thinking about carbon footprint, what operation costs will be. Those are all part of it. But this home is actually designed to primarily day-to-day function as a 2,990 square foot home. And the HVAC systems, which are electric mini split heat pumps, are zoned in a way where the bedrooms will be heated and cooled separately than the main living spaces level also separately. So if they're not using those spaces, the system does not need to heat or cool those spaces. As far as orientation and natural light, that was a big part of this to get south and west exposure. Materials selected by the clients and things like that were definitely influences with this project. I think that parking the vehicles inside, I know that is also just for protecting their vehicles, but also so they and their neighbors don't have to see it, but it also keeps anything that's leaking or anything like that inside. So I think that's a few of the things. I don't know if you have any more specific questions as it relates to that.
No, I just wanted to hear your overall thoughts on that. I think that's my only question for the moment. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Lars. Carrie Bush, any questions?
My only question is to the applicant. Do you have an idea what your usable square footage is of the lot itself? So from property line to property line within the creek setback, there's about a third possible of usable space in the site. Do we have any idea the square footage of that space?
As far as lot coverage is concerned, or
yeah, just area coverage,
or building envelope, I think is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
is it?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think in the report, I just remembered Carrie listed specifically that about 20,000 square feet of the lot is part of the creek setback. And I would say the building envelope is less than that amount. I could do a calculation of what the actual building envelope is. But as far as floor area ratio, I mean, it's well under, significantly under what the max allowable is.
Right.
Yeah.
That
Does
works.
that answer your question, Carrie?
That works. Yep. Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, it looks like I'm not sure what page I'm on, but there are some dimensions on the building, on that building envelope. So I was looking at that on page A2, building envelope. It's a trapezoid or parallelogram, something like that. It's about 163 feet wide. And then on the angle, it's 60 feet tall. So it's a little less than that. So 163 by 60 would be 9,700. 163 by 50 would be 8,500, something like that. So somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000 square feet of building envelope that has to encapsulate both the ADU and the house.
And
any other questions?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Gregory.
On that note, I think to Carrie's point is that as far as the ADU is concerned, that's a requirement of the subdivision as well as state mandated, as far as what the square footage is there. If that makes sense.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions, Carrie?
No, have none. Thanks.
All right, Christine, any questions?
Yes. I just would like to hear your comments, Gregory, about the balance of cut and fill. The design review standards discuss trying to balance the cut and fill.
Right.
We've got quite a substantial amount of off-haul. And additionally, we've got the retaining wall in the back that's adjacent. It's kind of hard to tell because the section's not cut exactly there, but I'm concerned about the slope back from the retaining wall cut, which isn't shown, of course, on the final drawings. It wouldn't be,
Sure.
but you have to lay that back. And it appears that you're going to be substantially into the tree root zone of that 7-trunked heritage tree. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. So the balance of fill and the impact on the trees in the proximity of the retaining wall cuts.
Sure. Well, so if it's okay with the board, I'd like if Chad could start that response as far as his design or our design and how we've approached this from a civil engineering standpoint. And then I can respond more to design criteria and kind of how we led this solution and layout and setting for the structures.
Sounds good.
Great,
Chad,
thanks.
are you there?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, great. I'm Chad Mosier with Lake Associates. I'm a civil engineer and a land surveyor. And just to also mention, I grew up in Sebastopol as well, and my mom and my stepdad still live there, so I'm familiar with Sebastopol. I've been a big fan of Sebastopol for a long time. So for the balance of the balancing the soil on the site, this site is a moderately sloping site, and just about any type of construction we do there is likely to generate off-haul, and that's because in general, best design practice is to not try to build a house or any kind of a structure for that matter, straddling between a cut and a fill, where part of the foundation would be sitting on native soil that was cut and part of it would be on compacted fill. It's just when possible, that's the best thing to do is to avoid that, because there's always the potential for a differential settlement between the fill portion of the site and what was on cut. So we typically try to design houses either fully into cut or fully into fill. So any type of a structure we put on this site in that building area is likely to generate off-haul. The balancing the site with using the soil somewhere else on the site, if this site didn't have a creek running through it, and vegetation around, that would certainly be an option, and that would be something we'd look at. Is like, how could we use that soil on site to create some landscape features and things such as that. Because of the constraints on the site with the creek, there's really not a lot of option to get rid of that soil on site, and so it becomes awful. The part of the construction of this, you're correct, there's a retaining wall along the back, and then some type of an interceptor ditch to route the water around the building. Those have been as much as feasible laid out to minimize the impact on the trees that are along the back. And that's our goal there, is to preserve that cluster of trees, the cluster of 7 trees that sit closest there, as well as the rest of the trees that are further away. But those in particular, we've taken that into account. There,
right.
any other questions related to that?
Christine, any other questions related to anything?
Interesting answers. That's all I've got to say.
I'd like to add just kind of the other, once again, kind of the design influence of the setting. If that the other part, like I was suggesting, is that all right, Christine? If I add to that, would that help?
I would love to hear it.
Great. So speaking of the creek setback, it has been it's been kind of figured as non-negotiable for us to do, disturb anything over there. And so it was critical for us as far as driveway and approach to garage to keep the existing slope as close as possible, which we are proposing to do in any area of the lot within the creek setback. So that kind of established our floor level for the garage for that purpose. We then, instead of, even though building height would have allowed us, depending on how you measure from the ridge to the ground, we could have gone up higher and stepped the condition area of the lower level on the east side. But that would have pushed the height of the overall building up even more. And we all felt like keeping the ridge and plate height and mass as low as possible would impact the neighbors the least amount. So that's kind of how we settled on cutting the lower level of the building into the slope there. In addition to that, as we looked at driveways and other ways to utilize more of the east side of the building, even if we pushed it farther away, it would require more fill and more grading in that area as well. Period.
It sounds great. I don't have any more questions.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Chair Luthen, if there are no more questions from the board for the applicant team, we can move on to public comment.
You're muted, Ted.
And you're muted, Ted. You're probably facilitating just fine. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and open it up for public comment. So if anybody has, Carrie, how do you handle that? Are you raising hands or?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. Paul Olsen has also already figured out at the bottom of your screen, for most of you, there's a raise hand. If you don't see that, don't worry. You can also put into the chat that you'd like to comment, or physically raise your hand. And I will get to you. If you do that, it'll probably be one of the later ones. But we do have a time limit of 3 minutes for public comment. We're not quite as fancy as City Hall, so we do not have a on-screen timer for this meeting, but I do have a timer that I will be utilizing, and I can give you a 30-second warning when your time is almost up. And so
Sounds
with
good.
that, if you could remain muted until it's you call your name, I'll call your name and then unmute yourself, and you can start. And so I will start with Paul Olsen.
Hi, my name is Paul Olsen. I live at 810 Jewel Avenue, directly east of the proposed development. We've lived there for 34 years. I want to thank the board for their work for the city of Sebastopol and considering our concerns. And I want to thank Becky for her comments about the trees. The inevitability of the residents behind our house was apparent to us for a long time. We did not contest their right to build the home, but in the last few weeks, our level of concern went from 0 to 100 when we finally saw plans that detailed the size and the scope of the project. And we have several concerns that we indicated in our letter. Number one was the size of the project. I'm concerned about the size of the structure compared to the surrounding residence. At 5,321 square feet for the main house, it is 92% to 248% larger than any adjacent home on First Street or Jewel. Comments about Swain Woods and other places within a quarter mile are not going to be looking at that house. The staff analysis that was presented in the plan cites concerns, quote, that the overall mass of the primary dwelling is considerably larger than the surrounding homes, and it recommends review and discussion of modified mass. And I wish to cite Ken Jacobs' letter, which you have in your packet, about from the resolution 2001 about the approval for the Shock subdivision, that the size and height in the subdivision shall not exceed those of similar homes in the general area. Ken Jacobs was a member of the Planning Commission at the Planning Board at the time of that application. I contend it doesn't fit with the neighborhood design. Number two, the tree planting and the foundation location. The arborist report regarding trees number 4 through 12 shows 4 removals and others that may require removal if they do not survive. The tree root pruning process to accommodate the close proximity to the foundation wall makes it very likely that these trees will require extensive pruning and therefore threaten their health, the stability of the tree, and ultimately removal. These trees have provided my property with shade and privacy for over 3 decades. The arborist further states regarding trees 5 to 14 that the minimal distance from the east foundation wall to the trunk of the trees presume extensive root removal may be necessary. And he adds, a large percentage of these trees' roots are in harm's way from the project. While I understand the desirability,
Paul, you have 20 seconds left.
while I understand the desirability to save the trees, I feel it's in the developer's interest to have them removed. Property line, we see in the plans that our property line is being claimed by the Shocks. No communication has been received about this issue, and I have no idea of how much of our fence line is going to be moved. That fence has been there since 1987 or before. And finally, my concerns about the grading and Calder Creek with the slope, the scope of the excavation. I have seen over the last 34 years that creek flood many times, and I'm concerned about the creek's health, the water flow, and the riparian system that it
And
supports.
Paul, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and so next we have, sorry, Becky, did you want to respond? Or actually, if you can wait, Becky, to respond until the end, that'd be great. Joe, you're next.
Hi, I'm Joe McCormick. I'll put on a timer for 3 minutes. This is my husband, Armin Galinsky. We live directly opposite the driveway that we've looked at for 22 years and wondered, What's happening? I'm very pleased to say hi to who will be our new neighbors, Steve and Rose. Thanks for the communications, the little notes. That was very nice. We knew nothing about the size and scale of this project, and now I know why, because you don't have to tell us about it. So my concerns are twofold. One, for 22 years we've lived here, and we've looked at that driveway, and we've wondered what's going in. At least it's a single family home and not 8 dwelling units. At some point, and some years ago, it was considered appropriate. Our driveways will face one another like this. It is on a blind corner of First Street. I wonder about if that's been taken into account. It's a very unsafe corner. If anyone has ever tried to walk on First Street, we have no sidewalks, or anyone who's tried to just drive out of their driveway could attest. Second, I'm wondering, now that I understand better the guidelines, or the guidelines about shall not in general exceed a reference point for square footage of surrounding homes. When homes are built, and you could consider ours a large home, but it is 2646 square feet. When homes are built and others are allowed or not based on a reference point that keeps getting bigger and bigger, isn't there a sort of precedent being set by squeezing in a 5,000 square feet home on that property? I completely worry about that for the long term, well, the future of our town, the character of our town, and more importantly, our neighborhoods. With that, I wanted to pass to my husband, but otherwise, I'm glad for the opportunity. It's the first chance we've had to really understand what was planned.
And I'm just curious why a couple who are planning to retire need a home of such a large size and a 3-car garage, which will add to the traffic, in addition to whoever's going to be renting or staying in the ADU. So there could be up to 4 or 5 cars coming back and forth through that area. This is a neighborhood where a lot of people walk around with strollers and dogs and pigs, among others.
Yes.
And I'm just concerned about the amount of noise, pollution, and impact on what is, essentially a bucolic area in a city of a moderate size.
Is it something you would like to say?
If we have any seconds left, I do want to just clarify the main entrance and egress from that property, from that lot on that property, will be on First Street, right?
That's correct. Yes.
That's a question. Okay, so we will be getting to know you, Steve and Rose, because we'll be coming out at the same time and going in. Luckily, we have 1 car. And on that, I'll put my concerns to the group.
Thank you.
Okay, next I see Judy Mccann and Steve Fabian, and you do each get 3 minutes if you'd like, but please go ahead. And please unmute yourself first. Sorry, Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Fabian. I live on First Street, pretty much south of these 3 lots. Excuse me, west of these 3 lots. What I'm concerned about is that the size of this structure is going to be 6,800 square feet. You can talk about the living part, and you can talk about the attached garage and workshop, but it's a huge structure. And what I'm afraid is going to happen is that we're going to wind up having what's going on in Silicon Valley and the peninsula, where people buy houses and then they wind up taking small houses and getting bigger and putting these McMansions in. And frankly, that's exactly what this house is going to be. I mean, it's just huge. The whole total mass of these 2 structures are going to be almost 8,000 square feet. It's a lot of structure being put on this property, and I think it's very much out of character with the rest of the neighborhood. And I really believe that even though we want the Shocks to have a nice place to live in, and I'm not trying to take that away from them. I think that if you look at mitigation 8 and the that is not trying to envision a situation where the houses keep getting bigger and bigger, because if you're going 150% over what the average house is in this neighborhood of between 2,000, 3,000 square feet, the next people want to build a house, they're going to start going from 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. It's going to be between 2,000 and 4,500 square feet. And it's just going to keep moving us to these, having Sebastopol be a city of McMansions instead of the residential character of that we have now. I'm done, but Judy may want to speak.
Hi, I want to say hi to the Shocks. I was extremely surprised by the size of the dwelling and the ADU. And I personally do not feel like that design and size fits with our neighborhood. There was mention of Swain Woods having large houses as larger or bigger or comparable, but we're really not Swain Woods. Swain Woods is a different neighborhood. And when you're out on a walk, you're okay, we're in Swain Woods now. And that is where big houses are. I'm concerned about the trees mainly. And I think there's going to be a lot more discussion and work on that, and maybe more understanding about the impact on the oaks. And so I'm certainly no expert, in fact, far from it, but I just want to express my concern that be seriously considered, that the oaks maintain their health and can shade both properties, and also create a curtain, between the properties. It is pretty close to the properties on the east side. That's all I have to say.
Thank you both.
I didn't get that.
All right, and it looks like Daniel is next. Daniel, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, find where I am here. Where are we? I think we are unmuted. Can you hear me?
You are unmuted. You're good to go,
hear you,
Daniel.
yes.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm here with Dale Jewell, and we bought the house at 814 Jewell Avenue, which is just to the east of the proposed Shock residence. Hi, Steve, and hi, Rose. So generally, it seems to me that this place, a lot of the issues could be solved by reducing the size of this place. If you've got a 6,700 square foot building that includes the multi-purpose room, the garage space, the living area, that's an enormous structure. And if you add up the 38 houses that are directly around it, across the street, on First Street, on Jewell Avenue, and you add up these 38 homes, you get an average size of 2,140 square feet. And the size of this thing at 6,700 square feet of structure is just enormous compared to those. It's huge. So it does not, even if you guys somehow say the average size is 3,000 square feet, which it is not, it's 2,400 square feet of every single house around it. There are some that are 1075 and others that are even smaller on First Street. So that's one thing. Making this a smaller place would solve that. Secondly, we're right up against the eastern wall of this place, its foundation wall. And the existing heritage trees, if we take all the necessary steps to assure their long-term survival, and that's advocated by the City of Sebastopol Tree Protection Plan, then you would not be excavating their roots and pruning their roots. You would not be pruning their roots to allow for the eastern foundation wall by quite a bit and a very short distance from those trees. You're going to kill those trees. And in addition to that, you also take out the overhead umbrella of these trees and then balance them on the other side by removing more limbs, which is all suggested in the arborist report, then you are really doing a lot of damage to those trees, and their chance of overall survivability is hugely lessened by those practices. Now, Paul's got trees on his property that are going to be then on the Shock property when they move the fence. And those trees are also going to need root pruning, and they're going to need overhead canopy pruning. And so those trees are in danger as well. And then we've got the whole business about Calder Creek. The issue is that excavating soil and debris produced by the construction phase may find its way into Calder Creek, which runs through that lot, which is lot 3. Reducing
Daniel, you have 30 seconds left.
Reducing the size of the project would make that less likely. It's also possible that runoff from landscaping may find its way into the creek, and reducing landscaping may make that less likely. So here's Dale, and she's got a few things to say.
Oh, hi. I don't have too much more to add. I was concerned about comparing our neighborhood to Swain Wood, which is just not a good comparison. Swain Wood is a different kind of animal altogether. And I'm not opposed to having a home go into that lot, but I just wonder how suitable it is to have a home there, given the fact that the creek and the trees are so susceptible to damage. And there is also, they are a home to the endangered tiger salamander. It's just the last riparian area in Sebastopol, and I'm just worried about it, about its survivability and its viability. So anything that could be done to preserve the area, the trees, the creek, the salamanders, the beauty of that area would be really important to me. And it seems like a smaller dwelling kind of would do that. So that's my concern, that the smaller footprint would be beneficial.
Thank you.
Okay, and I see a physical hand raised, iPad 5. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. And I will restart the timer at 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm Loretta Wilson. My husband and I at Sebastopol, we were here for 35 years on the other side of town. We built a house. We raised our family here. We moved back on July 9th. We were not informed of any of this, number one. Number two, we are on the south side of this, and it's adjacent to this property.
Full impact.
Full impact for us as far as watershed is concerned. We've already had issues in Sebastopol many years ago about culverts and things like that, because we're in a gully here. That's where this house happens to be, our house that we just purchased. And we're returning to Sebastopol for our golden years, bringing our grandchildren here to learn all about Sebastopol. And the only person that notified us was Daniel last Sunday, came and knocked at our door while our grandchildren were here. We all just moved in, and now we find we're in a really bad position as far as watershed and those beautiful trees back there. I can't imagine that anybody living in Sebastopol would approve removing any trees that have been here longer than all of us put together. We are exposed in a declining position, and I would love to see Gregory Beal come and show me that my house is not, and my yard is not going to get flooded by Calder Creek. It is going to. It's going to be backed up. It's going to be horrific for us. And we're in our 70s. We spent a lot of time in this town raising our kids. I worked at Brookhaven School. I know Paul's wife, Lori. I know all of his children. It's just amazing to me that Sebastopol of all towns would actually be okay with this. It's just, I would love to talk to the arborist, Becky, and find out. I would invite anybody to come to my property, even the Shocks, and have them tell me we're not going to be flooded. I can tell we'll be flooded. It's a no-brainer. It backs up. The whole thing is going to be backed up. Those poor trees are, it's just ridiculous. I get the shade thing, but we didn't buy this home to be flooded. We bought this home as our last home. This is our forever home, and we are in our 70s. When I retired, we did leave, but we left to follow our children. Now our children are coming back to follow us. And this is not okay. It's just not okay. We've been in this home
Ma'am,
for over.
your time is almost up.
Yeah. Okay, we've been in this home for 6 weeks. We're still unpacking. And Daniel was kind enough to come to our front door and share what the heck is going on. And I think it's absurd. And I'm sorry that the Shocks own the property, but something smaller, maybe, with a guarantee that the watershed is not going to impact us. It's going to impact us greatly, as it does everybody else. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, so I don't see any virtual hands raised or other commenters in the chat. So if there is anyone who would like to speak that I'm not able to get to because they're on the phone, if you could just unmute yourself and state your name, then we can get you in the queue.
Can my husband speak at all? No.
Yes, he's a member of the public, so he is able to speak if you'd like to.
His name is Stephen.
Hello, hi Rose and Steve. We had experience over at 666 Ellis Court where we lived when the Garmin project was developed behind us. I think they subdivided back there about 10 homes. And the loss of watershed was just devastating to our property. Everyone guaranteed me they were going to exchange the culvert and everything. I wouldn't have a problem. Well, I had a massive buildup of water because of the loss of watershed. So I'm sort of like a quasi-type expert on watershed in Sebastopol based upon the soil and the rain. And we had to order in like 2 double loads of rocks. Now, I don't know how many tons of rocks we had to order in, but that's all the soil we lost with all the big rains and everything. And I'm wondering what inspection or consideration has been given to downstream owners with the 6,700 feet of loss of watershed, excluding driveway land. What consideration has been given to the downstream owners on possible increase in water and probably maybe an increase in flow speed? Because on our property, it just devastated us. And it was all at my expense, and I was guaranteed everything was going to be taken care of. But I went to the city and I got no satisfaction. I think I even spoke with Paul. And another thing here, when we came into this property, we had a gardener come and clean it up. And on the north side, there is a big, gigantic culvert like this. I have no idea what it is doing over there. And it's all rusted out, and I have grandchildren. And I'm just curious, what department of the city do I discuss that with? And I'm
There's
finished.
already a fallen tree.
And plus there was a big fallen tree over there, but I'm just wondering what city department do I speak to about this unsafe culvert on my property? And I don't even know whether it's a water culvert or a gas culvert. You see, we just moved here like 5 weeks ago and we're finding about all these things all of a sudden, and we're unpacking boxes. And now we're spending time with you guys and everything because of our concerns, but I would appreciate knowing what department I could speak to.
That's it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone further, Chair Luthen.
All right. Well, thank you all for your public comments. We're going to bring it back to the board now for deliberation. So it seems like the big ticket items here are kind of footprint size, which I think speaks to building envelope and impact on trees. And I think the square footage issue is obviously related to that. But maybe we can just kind of go around and give some initial comments on kind of first thoughts. Let's see, why don't we start with Marshall. Marshall, do you have some first thoughts? And you're muted, by the way.
And Ted, I put my hand up for a reason.
Oh, you did? I didn't see your hand up. Oh, there it is. Wow, look at that. Well, while Marshall is unmuting, go ahead, Christine.
I would like to ask a question of Becky Duckles.
All right, go to it.
So I would like to hear Becky's comments on this tree root pruning business and what she thinks about it, because it seems like it's going to be fairly substantial under the current proposal.
Okay, I've just unmuted myself if you'd like me to respond.
That would be lovely.
Thanks, Becky. always appreciate your words of wisdom, Becky.
and thank you for asking.
And Becky, I have that a tree map with the trees identified. If you'd like, I can put that on the screen.
Okay, thanks. That would be great. I have two concerns. One is after being, consulting about trees and all of that for more than 30 years, I'm really uncomfortable with the idea of when a construction project is underway and plans are approved and the contractors are just trying to do their job, that an arborist on the site says, oh, this tree is losing too many roots, too many branches, too many trunks, and needs to be removed. I think this needs to be addressed proactively ahead of time in the planning. And thank you all for addressing it and inviting me to participate. So I think that it's really important because even the project arborist said some of the trees might need to be removed if they are losing too many roots and too many branches. Well, again, these are property line trees, and this is really something that really should be addressed early on in the planning, in the design stages. Can you guys all hear me? Is this okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Good. So that's my one little sort of, message from the pulpit. My second is that black oaks, interestingly, in my more than 30 years of looking at oaks, are a species that are particularly intolerant of construction impact, grading, filling, all those things. So we need to look closely at them, and they are property line trees owned by other people too. So my suggestion is that we just look closely at the planning, closely at, excuse me, excavation, grading, plan construction, and we figure out what's going to happen. Because I'll just give you one of my little factoids about trees, and that is that 90% of their roots are in the top 2 feet of soil. So if that zone is impacted by construction, grading, retaining walls, and all that, then you need to look at what's going to be happening to the roots. And retaining walls are particularly important because they have different, and Christine can address this, they have different methods of construction and design, and they might have T footings or L footings, and they might be this or that. But it's important to think about how they're designed and what the detail is, and how that is going to impact the tree roots within the top 2 feet of soil. So and then one last thing is that these trees on that east property line are really important for screening and privacy and protecting heritage native trees. And, and we can go into detail about the tree health and condition and things like that later. But just as a planning construction description, discussion, I'd like you to think about the roots as well as everything else. Thank you.
Okay, Becky, so can I ask you a specific question now? So
yes.
My understanding, and actually I have you to thank for my massively increased knowledge of trees.
Thank you.
The tree itself is creating its own internal balance by way of its root system and its trunk system. And if I'm understanding this correctly, if you start cutting off roots or trunks, especially some that may be substantial, you are running the risk of imbalancing that tree, and it could just go over. Is that reasonable thinking?
That's a really good question, and I run into that almost every day. And tree services are really fond of using the words balance and structure and lightening and thinning and cleaning and clearing. And so balance and all those things are kind of relative, and they our ideas of balance and structure and stability and anchorage really aren't quite the same as what the tree does to hold itself upright. So we have to look at the tree root structure, and Chip Sanborn is really good at that. And he really knows, about tree roots and things, but we have to look at how those trees are maintaining themselves in an upright position, receiving water. So we have to look at that in terms of where potential grading is going to be. But also when I do inventories of trees, I look at tree structure very differently from tree health and condition. A tree could be really healthy and look really green and full of leaves, but be structurally unsound. So we have to look at those things separately.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Christine, while you're on a roll, what are your initial thoughts here?
Okay. Can we get back to the, wait, let me see where I'm going here. There we go. That helps me. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back to this language in the conditions of approval for the subdivision. And first of all, in general, I have to, pick a bone with that a little bit, because its general meaning is that you are, I'm reading here from the Collins Dictionary meaning, that you are talking about something as a whole rather than a part of it. So I don't really think that language goes towards allowing you to change the meaning of the rest of the sentence. And the rest of the sentence goes back to this subdivision shall not exceed those of similar houses. And then it gets specific of more construction in the general area, including both the First Street area and the Swains Wood neighborhood, Jewel near Hayden. So that language to me says that it's looking in the specific close proximity to this residence in this subdivision. Not all over Swain Woods, but Swain Woods, Jewel near Hayden. So I feel like, Gregory came up and he ran through all these houses that were larger sizes, but it would be helpful to see some kind of a map, like further in this document here, there's a map showing the square footages of the houses that are in close proximity to this subdivision. And I don't know where Gregory, he mentioned some street names, but it would be helpful to have a map that showed where those were. Because I'm stuck on this square footage thing, because this is a very specific language, shall not exceed. Okay, so that's my initial comment on the size. Additionally, I'm concerned about the trees, of course, and the grading and the pruning. And those trees are essential, obviously being heritage trees, but also to the properties to the east. Because if something were to happen to those trees, those people are going to be overcome with a westward exposure. And that's going to be really difficult in terms of energy and heat gain and the impact upon their homes. That's the hardest exposure around here. So I have that initial comment, and then I'm also concerned about this property line survey, because it seems like we have this existing condition that's been accepted generally going on since the 80s at some point in time, and now suddenly we're moving the property line over, and it doesn't seem like the neighbors have had any say so in this, or understanding where this came from, or really anything. It's almost like a takings to them. So I'd like to see some further discussion about this. And then finally, because of the couple that just spoke that were just to the south, it's an interesting issue of having the water, because we're taking a lot that has the water coming down and absorbing into the soil and going into the creek, and now we have all this hardscape, and that water is going to be collected. And I'm curious to know, where does that water go? Where is it daylighted? So that's a question for the civil engineer, and this might help to mitigate some of the concerns of the the property to the south, or not if it's being dumped into the creek. I don't know where that water drainage goes, and I'd like to know. So those are my initial preliminary comments.
All right, thanks, Christine. Marshall, what are your initial comments here?
I really am focused on, to me, the major asset of this house is the tree behind it with the 7 trunks. And I'm looking at the problem, as I see it, is the sewing and crafts room. I think that could be basically eliminated, and the master suite above can stay. But if you get rid of that down there, then there's plenty of room around the tree for the roots. And there's square footage to burn down there. I think it with a little bit of puzzling around, that could be put somewhere else. But if you just had the natural grade under the master suite and the retaining wall just did a jog there, you have incredible space for those roots below that master bedroom. Incredible space for the tree, and there's a good chance it could survive. The way this retaining wall is in here, it's definitely going to die and or fall over. At my house, I have 2 of those big trees, and I only live where I live because of those trees. And I just can't imagine somebody on purpose killing that tree. So that's my main comment. I think everyone else has addressed all the other issues thoroughly. So I'll just be quiet at this point. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Marshall. See, we're going in the opposite order. Carrie, what are your thoughts?
Thanks, Ted. So thanks. Well, there's a lot to talk about here, but I'd like to start with the applicant. I'd like to thank them, for their submittal. It's important to recognize the amount of time, energy, and effort that goes into these submittals. There's a lot of work and a lot of money, and so we try to respect that and understand that. I also feel like you guys threaded a needle with your program, and the program is a rather large one. You've got a lot of wants and needs in a very small space. And so I think Builder Studio did a heck of a job really kind of responding to that site plan. When I think of site planning for our own firm here, we look at context and we think about how structures really kind of marry sites. And the big question really to me is how does a structure like this respond to a site like that? And is it a structure that responds to a creek, or is it a structure that responds to a much bigger open flat space? So that's something just to consider as an architect and a site planner. And how does it really respond to a site? And here we are, we're sitting before each other, and I think the program, which was said by one, is that it's a large program, and to avoid any conflict with either being a neighbor, right? Because neighborhoods are all about that. That's what makes a home are your neighbors. You talk to a guy who lives in a home that's less than 950 square feet. So just for perspective and for full disclosure, it's a large structure on a very restricted site. So the pushback is not, to me, quite abnormal. It's quite normal, especially when you have, mature overstory trees that are being monitored and protected by the city as they should, and that's why the board is here. But it's understanding how that responds to the overall site plan. And if we all had to really look at that as the biggest picture of all. It's the response to a program and how it responds to a site. And, we can get into the details. I wanted to ask maybe Mrs. Duckles if she felt like that tree number 7, it's a black oak, it's kind of marrying a white oak up into the site. It's really kind of an anomaly in that way. But you know, it's a rather large 6-foot diameter prong. But, you know, is it considered mature or over mature? And as you mentioned earlier, Ms. Duckles, that, you know, black oaks in particular don't respond to people. They hate people. They hate construction. Most trees do, and that's understood. So if I could, would you consider this a mature black oak, or is it an over mature black oak? If Ms. Duckles around. If not, it's no big deal.
I am. I just had to unmute myself. That it's a mature and possibly over mature, but it's well worth preserving because it has value not only to the property owners on this site, but the adjacent property owners who share ownership. And so and again, it's a black oak that's not tolerant of construction. And so I think it's worth preserving. And I think that the analysis by the project arborist Chip Sanborn were interesting and based on his experience, you know, with tree service. And so I think that we can go into this further as a, and he tried to evaluate the trees a little bit in terms of their survivability, their quality. And so I agree with you, or not. It is a heritage tree. It's worth preserving. It's worth looking at further in terms of protection and keeping it on site upright, intact, and without providing hazard to other people. One small comment about construction is that when roots are cut on a tree during construction, over my 30 years of experience doing this, it might be 5 years before the tree declines or dies or falls over because of root loss. And so when a tree experiences root loss during construction, there's a wound to the roots, and usually oak root fungus infects those roots, and then it takes a while to progress to the main stem and destabilize the tree. And so we try to prevent that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, something's got to give, right? You've heard it from an arborist that we have a significantly worth preserving black oak. It's all over the critical root zone. The foundation of anything is without a doubt within the critical root zone. I did a quick calculation from the optimal tree protection zone for a mature, thank you, and not an over mature tree. But I mean, it could be 72 feet, right? Based on a 6-foot diameter circle or a diameter trunk. But it's just that I think the program is trying to force too much in a very confined space, and this is the result. We can talk about possibly as a DRB all the other issues that come with it, but you know, size of structure is one thing. You know, the architecture itself, the colors, there's a lot to talk about. So overall, those are my just general comments, and we'll likely be looking at continuance, in my opinion.
Thanks, Carrie. Lars, initial thoughts?
Sure. I would like to say, echo Carrie, that I think thanks very much for the very detailed application. I don't think that's my feedback. So there's a lot to look at. I think the studio's done a great job really presenting a lot of information here. It's a tricky site for sure. It's also has this very different feel from First Street as the access, but Jewel it's closer to, and trying to mitigate those two things I think is pretty challenging. So to me, I think I agree with that tree needs to be preserved. You walk onto that site, it's just that's the thing you look at, and for the site and for I guess it's the Olsens, I think, right behind. Like if that comes down, that everything changes for them and for the uphill side. But really I think you can have a kind of square footage discussion, then you can play that a lot of different ways. And I appreciate Gregory's analysis of all that, but you look at it's not just the size, it's the scale of the building, right? So if you come onto this site, and the 3D renderings are great, they're so helpful to look at. It's a big project, it's a big house. And I appreciate that the program is driving that. Sure, we all want different spaces in our homes to do different things, but I think given the restrictions of the creek and the tree, that it's too big of a house for this site. It just is. I think even if you're only living in 3,000 of the 5,200 square feet or 5,300 square feet, there is still 2,300 square feet in addition to the 3,000, right? You can't just say that's something, that's sort of dismissive. It's not. It's a big house. The downstairs, puts it up high. It's part of the project. You can't just kind of, brush it aside. So I understand in our purview, it's challenging, right? It meets the height restrictions, it meets the setbacks. It's doing a lot right, but it's still, as an overall sense on the property, it feels like it's too much. That's my overall impression.
Yeah, thanks, Lars. Yeah, I'm feeling much the same way. It's as you both said, it's a great, very complete application. Totally understand where it came from. I could definitely hear it in Gregory saying, that first floor, that upper floor is what drove this whole thing. And getting these spaces and these orientations. And I totally understand that. It is a big piece of property. It's an acre site. And I think if someone said, oh, I've got a big flat acre piece of property and I want to put up a 5,000 square foot house, I wouldn't think twice about it. But this isn't just any old acre property. This is a heavily encumbered 1 acre property that has an envelope of a third of that, and it has tree issues that carve into that envelope even more. And so, everything isn't doable everywhere. And I think that's what we've got something that someone really wants trying to get put in a place that it's just not going to fit. Because I do think that the trees, those heritage trees along the east side, are enormously valuable to not only this property, but the other. And we've talked a lot about the root pruning and those sorts of things. But the other thing needs to happen is some severe canopy work to get up and over this building, because this building is, it's a 2-story building, and a lot of those branches are not up that high on a lot of those trees. So not only is there going to be root pruning, there's going to be canopy pruning, and I think you're just going to have a real problem. And I really think it just comes from trying to pack too much single-story program into an encumbered site. That's kind of what we have. I do agree that the condition of approval issue with the square footage, I think I think that is something we should take seriously. I mean, these things are written into agreements for a reason. I agree with Christine's observation that I think the in general text means in general to these 3 properties in this subdivision. In general, these houses should not exceed or shall not exceed. So that's my interpretation of that. So, I'm feeling like I understand that first floor drives it, because on the second floor, there's just space everywhere on that set, on the lower floor. There's just storage space after storage space after unconditioned space. There's just space everywhere down there. So I don't think it's an issue of overall square footage or what's conditioned or what's not conditioned. I think it's an issue of the area of the footprint when this thing hits the ground. That's what's driving the problem. At least for me, it is. So I agree with Carrie that I think a continuance is in order. I think what I would like to see would be, something that gives those heritage trees the space they need. And also not only just addresses the root systems, but also addresses the canopy and starts showing some of those things happening. So we know what the impact up top is going to be as well. What are our thoughts on, so I guess kind of sounds like everybody's in agreement on a continuance. Is that true? Carrie, you said it. I see you nodding. Lars, is that how you're feeling? Lars is nodding. Christine and Marshall, I can't see you nodding. Is that what,
I'm
what
nodding.
you're thinking?
I'm nodding.
Okay.
Nodding.
Okay. So I guess the next question, if everybody agrees that a continuance is in order, are there some, Gregory, I'll get to you in 1 second. Are there some specifics we can address? And before we do that, let's give Gregory a chance to pipe in here.
Mm-hmm. And I think, did I just see that Chad had his hand up too, or did he just disappeared? Oh, there
he's back.
Okay. I'm still here. I was actually just trying to get attention for you. So
okay.
Sure, more of us raised our hand, we get attention.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I just wanted to, gosh, so much of this, I feel like in-person conversations and dialogue could have helped. And I don't blame many of the comments that have been made both by neighbors and by the board. I think context, actually interpretation of the parameters that we are allowed to work within legally and just as a respectful neighbor is really complicated. And we were aware of that throughout this design process. And I just want to say we'd be crazy if we weren't exponentially more aware of that with everybody's concerns and comments here. This is a really unique site. The subdivision 3 years ago provides the legal right to build on this and an envelope to build within. We worked with within those parameters. We interpreted the words of the subdivision as well as everything related to the city. And I just want everybody to hear, and I think that Steve and Rose will not object to me saying this, is that all of us want to preserve every tree we can on this property. And I think that what I want to state is that we are wanting and willing. I learned a lot. Becky, as I was on the design review board and tree board for years, and Becky, I always appreciate your feedback. Christine, I appreciate yours, and Lars and Carrie, I haven't met Marshall yet, and Ted. This is really helpful to us to understand how this project comes off. And I actually feel like I let my clients down by how this project was presented, especially with the square footages being all over the place, not telling more of a story of how we got to this point. Because we, a garage and shop, they have an RV, that's the third garage, and to preserve the RV, but also not have the neighbors look at RVs, because I know most neighbors don't want to stare at RVs. We created a space for that. We found in studies that providing parking and storage and shop for all these things as a separate building, yes, on paper would result in 3 smaller masses of structures. But we felt very, very confident, and maybe mistakenly so, that the impact of putting this underneath the house would be less to the neighbors, especially on the east side of the property. I appreciate Marshall's comment about the sewing craft room. We've actually explored, and I actually have 3D renderings now if we wanted to, but it sounds like when it's worthy, but we've explored a number of options we want that tree to stay too. I don't think there's any question about that. And we've learned a lot from Becky And, I've read a lot of CHIPS reports, both as a tree board member, but also on this side of things. And I learned every time looking at it, I'm trying to understand it. There's terminology in there I don't. And Becky helps explain it and her perspective as well. Carrie bringing up, the question of 72 feet of clearance needed to be away from this tree to not affect it at all. Well, that with the building envelope and the location, which we didn't choose that location, pretty much limits it so significantly. But we want to take that into consideration. I think we're completely open to doing more research and more testing. And I agree with Becky that when construction is there and everybody's hot to trot and money's on the line, it's hard to make decisions about what to do with trees. And I didn't even actually ever know about common ownership of trees until right now, this evening. So I'm just kind of offering some humble pie here. And I really just think that there's, I have a laundry list of listening to everybody's comments, the public, as well as each board member, about what I was feeling like justifications or a story behind how we got to certain things. I feel like with what I've heard from the community and heard from the board, I think those comments would be better served as a follow-up and a continuance. And I would really like to invite a way to communicate more with the neighbors now that we understand how this is being perceived and felt by everybody. Because what I want more than anything is, I mentioned at the beginning of this, I live in this neighborhood, I work in this neighborhood, my skids go to school. I'm not sure that's a thing, but kids go to school here. And it's really important to Steve and Rose that they be part of this community. And I just want to make sure that I feel like a lot of people have taken offense to this project, if that's fair to characterize it. And none of us meant that. And I think once again, there's a story and a rhyme and a reason behind a lot of those points. But I think this has been going on for 2 hours now. I want to respect everybody's points. I want to meet with our clients and our team. I'd love to be able to talk with Becky more if she's available. And I would really like to proactively come up with some options and scenarios, which we already were, but I feel like there's even more information we've learned here. And, I feel like at the end of the day, this delay of doing more of this is going to cause some hardship for our company and the chances of being able to start this before the winter. And it's going to cause some hardship for our clients who are going to cause delay for the start of this project. But I think them moving back into their neighborhood and being welcomed and glad to see the neighbors and feeling like everybody's been heard and that this project, there's limitations. A lot of these requests, we can't meet. And I understand why you guys are bringing these comments up. I'm talking about public comment. This is private property. There is, all of these things that the city and the subdivision allows a private owner to do there. It's other properties, I think it was mentioned earlier, but it's another public comment is the design review isn't participate in new construction. So this setting a precedence or not, of what other people are going to do, you don't have a chance to say anything in all of those. This is a unique situation because of it being part of the subdivision. And like I said, as a human being and as a neighbor, I'm glad it was because we learned a lot tonight. And I know Steve and Rose really well now after this last year or more working with them, that they, this is a community thing. and I just feel horrible for how all of you have felt not being notified about this, feeling like you're having to come up in strong defense of all this. And I feel, we'll stop there, excuse me. Sorry, sorry. I think I've said what I need to say, Ted, go ahead.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Gregory. Carrie, your hand is up.
Yeah, Ted, thanks. And thanks, Gregory. I want to say something hopefully useful and also something to take back to the arborist. But, having read through the arborist report, I know it's kind of contingent on the trees, but, it's legit. And I read the report. I don't want to say we because I'm not speaking for the board, but from myself, it's a legit report. Sanborn does great work. Their approach and strategy I felt seemed adequate. The idea of air spading and understanding what the root systems are doing. I mean, having read that report is valuable, right? So it's not a real dogmatic approach to how they're going to approach the construction and the impact of the trees. That's one thing. So that's tree number 7. Tree number 4, it was half removed. I mean, it's half gone anyway. So that's a simple removal in my opinion. So as giving you some feedback and some guidance to move forward as a designer, I feel like that's pretty straightforward. So also the cottonwoods and the acacias that we're asked to review or at least discuss as a board, and they're exempt from protection. There are significant trees, but I see them as weedy species, and I think there's always opportunity to do better. And I see from the plan and the site plan that you got to try to populate valley oaks within the creek watershed is a great idea. These are great values for moving forward in the project. So I just kind of wanted to note that, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of feedback to build upon.
It does. Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carrie. Let's see. Carrie, our planning Carrie, you had something to say.
Thank you. I do just want to make a couple of notes and Carrie, your comment about acacias. They are actually a pyrophytic tree, and so I fully support removing acacias along with some of the other like invasive species like eucalyptus that are. I know that can be controversial because some people like their big eucalyptus trees, but we do need to, obviously all you need to do is look out your window today to know that we need to be cautious of those things. I did just want to clarify for the board and the members of the public a couple of things. One is so we do require design review for certain residential projects in town. If it's a subdivision, I believe, of 4 or more lots, it requires, or in this case, 3 lots, but as a part of the subdivision approval, it does require design review for each of the homes. And so that is not an everyday occurrence, but given we do have a few vacant lots that are not subject to that, but more and more of our vacant lots will be subject to that in the future. Just for the board's context on why this single family home is coming. It's not simply that subdivision ordinance, it is in our code as well. In terms of the property line question, I know this is not always fun to hear, but fences are not property lines. They do, so we do go by a site survey and what the actual property line is. Most fences were just either built over time, no one knows where they came from. I mean, my own property, my neighbors and I are working, half the fences on her property and half the fences on my property. We kind of agreed over time as we replace it, we'll try to fix it. But that does not designate property line. We do go by a site survey, such as was done for the subdivision on that. And then I do want to note one thing. This is, unfortunately, my planning director report is at the end of the meeting. But for this particular neighborhood and maybe of use to the applicant and owners as well, next Tuesday at the Planning Commission meeting, 6 p.m., we are having a presentation on Calder Creek. The project for the city is focused on naturalization in Ives Park, but the presenters will also be talking about upstream and downstream. So for those who might be interested in this neighborhood, that information will be posted tomorrow on the city's website, and I promise the Zoom link won't be confusing. So please join us there. And I think there might have been one other clarification question, but I don't quite remember. So if someone else had one of the members of the public had a question about stormwater and who to contact at the city department. And that would be the city engineer for stormwater related issues. And so I did just want to make sure we got that information out there. Thank you.
Just to clarify, Carrie, I think what the neighbor was commenting on is it's actually not a culvert. city easement on their property just south of the Shocks property that I'm not sure if it's a water or sewage line, but that was, I think, on the public records as far as, I think it's water.
Got it. Okay, so in that case,
not a culvert.
yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
Yes, so if there is an easement on your property, it should be on your title report. It sounds like they just purchased the property, so they have a title report. But if you do have questions about it, if it's a sewer or stormwater or water easement of any sort, the city engineer would still be the right person to talk to get more information on that. Thank you, Greg.
Sounds good. Thank you, Carrie. All right, coming back to the board. Somebody want to fashion a motion for continuance?
Well, maybe since I mentioned it, I'll fashion that.
All right.
Make a motion to continue this project. Yeah.
And Carrie, you should probably, because we don't know how long revisions will take, I would continue it to a date uncertain.
Oh, to date uncertain. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that work as a motion?
Yeah.
You're done. Yeah, that's it.
I thought that might be it. Okay. Anyone?
Yeah. Can I have a second on that motion?
Sure, I'll second it.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I know Marshall and Christine, you're both muted.
Yeah,
Sure, listen,
Yes.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Go ahead, Carrie.
I was just going to note as staff that it would help us as we work with the applicant if there was any discussion or direction regarding square footage limits for the home. That way there's I realize that it's maybe somewhat nebulous given it still needs to be placed in the right location, but that's my comment.
Okay.
That was what my comment was going to be regarding, was that we're continuing, but shouldn't we have some direction for the applicant? I mean, my general feeling is we've got this document. Actually, we have available the person that was involved in producing that document, the planning document, which was Ken Jacobs. It might be interesting to hear from him. He couldn't be here today, I guess he said, but.
Right, Christine, he couldn't be here, but.
The intent of the thinking behind that, the words, the language.
Oh, you mean the language? Okay, I was going to say, we actually redid the analysis of the sizes so that, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Thank you, Christine.
Gregory, do you have something quick?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I feel like that is a very complicated topic.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to ask permission to find a way to discuss that with the board and make that public to neighbors and everybody else prior to next meeting. But I also just, Ken Jacobs was the biggest opponent to this subdivision to begin with. So him being biased to his interpretation of this may not be the right person to talk to. But I think we should involve the city attorney to establish this, because I think this is so critical and important to this project. I don't think it's fair to rush a conversation, and I want to make sure everybody knows about it before next meeting, but I want to give it its due diligence, if that's okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Sounds good. That's right. Thank you. On the subject of maximum square footage, I for one, I think I'm hesitant to do that. For me, it's more about the footprint than it is the square footage. And I think that's kind of the issue we have right now, is that, conditioned airspace is, 4,000 square feet or whatever it is, but that's very different than the mass of the size of the footprint. And that's what's driving the problem. It's not the square footage, conditioned, unconditioned. It's not the overall square footage that's the issue. It's the footprint on hitting the ground that's the problem. So if I had direction to add to the motion, it would be, to resolve the impacts on protected trees along the eastern frontage, however they choose to do that. I mean, we've got a building envelope that they have to stay within. I guess to me that the overall square footage can be sliced and diced all sorts of different ways. So I'm less inclined to put a limit on that. It seems like the driver is the envelope, but.
I would just like to reiterate the point that this language in this planning document, which is law, is very specific. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to get to the point where we have an accurate understanding and interpretation of what that language means. I mean, English language has words with meaning, and those words are pretty specific and definite. And that's law. That planning document is the law. So that's why I'm being particular about this. Because that's on the other side, we have people that are paying very close attention to what that law is. So yes, I think it would be useful to include Larry McLaughlin possibly in this conversation, because he's the legal interpreter for the city of the city of Sebastopol.
Yeah,
but
good point.
That's where I'm going with this, and I think it's very important. So, generalities are nice about footprints and things like that, but this is a very specific legal language.
Yeah, you're right. Point taken. Yeah, I agree. It would be a good thing to get to the bottom of, because I think that does it has impact on the footprint, but it also, just like you said, words mean something, and yeah, they have to.
So how is that done? Is that the responsibility of the board, the city, the client, or the applicant? What is the way done?
Excellent.
That's a good question.
Laura.
Yeah, who is the arbiter of that? Okay, Carrie, what do you got?
I'm not raising my hand because I'm the arbiter of that. That is the discretion. But in terms of a process, one option that we could look at is setting a special meeting, and I'm hesitant to continue to date certain for the purposes, not a project for their project review, but of discussing the square footage issue. When the city attorney can be available. Unfortunately, obviously I'm not going to be able to get a hold of them right now to see when that is. So that is an option. I would probably still do it as a date uncertain. And I will note, just because, I have a lot of emails from folks. However, if you want to be notified by email, because I don't know if all of we can certainly do a radius mailing, even though it's not required. It doesn't prohibit us from doing that. And so we can certainly do that. But if you also want to be notified by email, if you send your email to Rebecca Mansour, she's on our website, or myself, my email is also on the website, or Jeff, who is planning temp at cityofsebastopol.org. Probably the easiest of all of us to know. We'll make sure that you get an email notification of future meetings as well. But Chair Luthen, that's one option, is to just continue this to be able to discuss just the square footage issue.
I think that would be beneficial. Does everybody agree?
Sure.
I see. Yeah.
Yes.
That sounds good. So Carrie, would that be step one, would be a continuance to have that square footage discussion? And then we would move forward from there, or do we need a general continuance?
Yeah, you can continue it just with the motion that Carrie has, Committee Member Bush has already made. Okay. And what you talk about in that meeting is up to you. And I think we've now just clarified maybe what that next step is.
Perfect. Okay. Great. So back to our motion. We have a motion and a second. I think we are all in agreement. We would like to have that legal conversation about square footage. And any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, let's call a question. All in favor of the continuance, say aye, raise your hand.
And
aye.
Actually, I'd like to do a roll vote just to
have roll vote. That's great.
All right. So we have Member Bush.
Aye.
I'm just going to call you by your first names if you don't mind. It's too late for my, I'm going to fumble. Lars.
Aye.
Christine.
Aye.
Marshall.
Marshall's muted.
Marshall's muted.
How about now?
There he is.
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay, aye.
All right. Thank you. And Chair Luthen.
Aye.
Thank you. And so this will be continued to a date uncertain, and we'll work with the city attorney and the applicant, as well as the DRB members, to find a time that will work to continue that. And then we'll let both via email and public notice let people know.
Sounds great. So once again, I'd like to thank our applicant. I'd like to thank our neighborhood participants, and also staff and Becky for excellent planning report. So really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And with that, this meeting is adjourned. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. And Chair Luthen, we did have one item.
That we postponed.
So that's if you don't mind, it's
planning matters of interest.
Yeah, nothing. So I'm actually going to skip that. The only big thing I wanted to talk about was the Calder Creek and the water conservation. If you are a resident in Sebastopol, you probably got a big packet from Bay Run. And so that's certainly something you can take the opportunity to have someone come to your house and look at potential ways to save water. And there are financing available as well through that. So I just want to let folks know that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about with the board, and I'll just leave it at this for now, is that I had suggested, I think in a conversation with Carrie Bush, the idea of doing tours of past projects to talk about design review guidelines, how they're implemented, what the outcome was, and things like that. And for right now, if the board members, especially those of you who've been on for a while, know of addresses or projects you'd like to include in that kind of a walking tour or driving tour, please, or bicycling tour, we'll figure that out. Please just send those suggestions to me, and we'll pick that up at a future meeting.
Excellent. Love it.
Okay. And
anything
and
else?
Ted, yep.
Yes.
That's it for me.
Great. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next time.
All right.
All right.
Thanks again. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.